his third now. He's also a Sunday Times and New York Times best-selling author. And his third novel, The Final Cut, will be out in August, I would say. August. Fantastic. I've got it here. It's on my to-be-read pile. I'm hopefully going to get to it next. Can't wait. So next up then we have a man who really needs no introduction, certainly to law enforcement and mental health officials. He is Adrian McKinty, the Sunday Times and New York Times best-selling author of The Chain and the Sean Duffy series as well. We'll not leave out Sean Duffy. Hello, Adrian.
Hello, it's good to be here, and I think this should be fun.
I think it should be fun. So listen, we're not going to talk about books. You won't see this panel at the Hay Festival. This is about when it all kind of goes wrong. It's not all champagne and canapes and private jets, as you're about to hear. Sometimes, as I think Linwood summed up this panel in a tweet today, and he said, becoming an author opens you up to ways of humiliation which you not previously thought possible. So Linwood, why don't you kick us off? What's it like being, a successful author as opposed to some of our horrible times we've had before?
No different. It's you think you might reach a point where the humiliations will end, but they really don't. It's a great humbling experience to become an author and reach this point where you think, wow, I've achieved such fame and so forth, and I'll be mobbed and not stopped on the street. And of course, nothing like that happens. But I've got, and we'll give them all at once, but I have like 3 favorite stories over, humiliations are kind of endless, but I have 3 that I think are classic. And I'll tell this first one. First of all, this is my favorite thing to do when I get together with other authors, because we just love to talk about the stories of humiliation. They're so funny. And they're the kinds of things that only we can really appreciate amongst each other about this kind of thing. But one quick one, and then I'll just, and I'll get back to the other ones later. So, it's like when you have a book that comes out, you think, do the stores have it? And if they've got it, how many copies do they have? And is it up front store? Is it in the back? Is it, they got one copy spine out that nobody will ever find. And so I went into a bookstore one time. This is actually a humor book I did years ago that was not part of my crime series, just came out in Canada. And I go into this store in suburban Toronto, and I look, and I go to the humor section thinking, will they even have it? And not only do they have it, and it's face out, and there's half a dozen copies, but there's one of these little cards slid under it with like a store employee recommendation. And it said, recommended by Jamie. And I thought, wow, is that ever great? So I go to the front of the store. There's a kid working the cash. He's got a, hi, my name is Jamie button. And I said, Jamie, I see you read and recommended my book. Thank you so much. Would you like me to sign those for you? And Jamie had that sort of proverbial deer caught in headlights look, which I attributed to the fact that he wasn't used to meeting huge celebrities, and so, of course. And so I let him back, and we go back down the aisle, and we go into the humor section, and as soon as he sees it, it all came back to him because, oh, yeah, right, he says, somebody moved this, and he took the card out from under my book and slid it under the book next
in front of you.
In front of me.
Could have done that another time.
And then he said, very graciously, well, you can sign those if you want. And then he went back to the cash. So I decided for some time after that not to ever do that again, to talk to people in the store, anything like that. So it was kind of traumatizing. That's one of my faves, although I have at least one that's almost better, but I'll save it.
Save it. Oh, I love these. This is one of my favorite things to do. So, Steve, come on, you were successful right off the bat. I mean, your book came out in a huge praise, and rightly so. That's one of the classics of the genre. I love that book. But how was your experience? Did you have any?
Well,
I'm sure it wasn't always, wine and flowers and brilliant parties.
It did leave me a bit unprepared for events and also completely unsure of what to expect. So, yeah, I think I was thinking about all of my stories of events that went badly, and there are so many of them. I'm starting to wonder if I ever had any events that went well. But my favourite one was I was in Australia. I flew to Melbourne they had the Melbourne Writers Festival. This is actually the second book. And I'd been there with the first book, and it had gone really well. Everything was like sold out or nearly, and I felt, like this is going to be good. This is going to be like a nice little tour for me, and also get a bit of holiday, sort of. So anyway, I sort of flew all the way there, and sort of the next day, still very jet lagged, was taken in a taxi that was late. So I was running late to a place called Footscray, which is a suburb of Melbourne. And I got there just before the event was about to start, and I was really, I just needed a coffee. And they had an urn, and I remember the first thing that happened was I said to the organizer, I was, welcomed and everything, and it was all hello. And I said, they said, do you need anything? Would you like anything? I said, I'd love a coffee, please. And she looked at me in this kind of very, like I'd asked for something really strange or really unusual or outrageous, and said, well, we don't normally turn the urn on until the end of the event. And I was thinking, could you make an exception? Just, I've flown all the way from the UK. Anyway, so I did the event, and it was very difficult because the guy who was interviewing me was also very snarky, and I genuinely don't remember his name. Please don't Google it in case it's out there. But the whole way through, he was also a thriller writer, but every question was a variation on why do you think your book was a success and mine haven't been? Pretty much. So I felt like attacked all the way through. And also every time I looked, it was full. It was quite full. I mean, 20 or 30 people, but it was quite full. But every time I looked out into the audience, nobody was paying attention. No one was looking at me. They were all just staring down or around. And I was like, this is like, I don't know quite what's going on. Were they expecting somebody else? Am I the warm-up act or anything? And anyway, so after the event finished and we did the whole any questions, and nobody had any question, which is always the worst nightmare. I always really hate that because I always think it just means that I didn't do a good job because no one's interested. So I was whisked off by my publicist, and I said, I don't mind waiting and signing some books. And she went, no, we're going. And she put in the tracks on the way back that Footscray, one of the things it's famous for is a big heroin problem. And that basically everyone in the event was there because there's free tea and coffee afterwards. Nobody cared about my book at all. So I've nothing against obviously taking literature to anyone who wants it, but I don't think they did. So that felt very humiliating. And that was the first event on that tour, and it was probably the worst tour I've ever done. But yeah, there are more stories from that tour. But yeah, that was pretty bad.
That's awful. That's so awful. When you get a bad interviewer, it's all like you can all relate to this. Adrian is relating to this now. So that bastard Cavanagh is ruining this whole thing. McKinty, give us one of your crackers here.
Well, my very first book was this book called Dead I Well May Be. And I had 3 events for that, and each one was an escalating disaster. Each one was worse than the one before, especially the last one, which was a horrific nightmare. But I'll save that for the end. So the very first event of my entire life as a professional writer was at the, I'm going to give the bookstore's name because they were so horrible to me. It was the Boulder Bookstore in Boulder, Colorado. And I was living in Denver at the time. And this is my first novel called Dead I Well May Be. And I got up to Boulder by myself. I think I drove from Denver. Steve will vouch, I'm not the best driver in the world, a bit of a nervous driver. And I got up to Boulder and parked the car and found the Boulder Bookstore. And they had this huge poster in the window, and it said, author event, Owen Colfer, coming next month for Artemis, one of the Artemis Fowl books. And I thought, oh, fair enough. I mean, but anything for me. And then they said, tonight, for one night only, some local person's name, free yoga. And I went, okay. And so I went in and went to the assistants, and I said, I'm doing an event tonight. And she said, oh, I don't think so. She says, she looked at my body and said, are you the yoga teacher? With that thin, skinny Boulder contempt for anybody not from Boulder. She said, are you the yoga teacher? And I said, no, I'm here to do a book reading. She said, I don't think so. And I said, yes. And she said, can you get manager? And manager comes down. And he says, oh, yes, that's right. We have a bit of a clash. We've got the yoga happening downstairs, but you're happening upstairs. And he said, your event starts in 15 minutes. No one showed up. Do you still want to go through with it? And I said, I've come all the way here. I'll go upstairs and see. So we'll go upstairs. And also lives in Boulder is my cousin, Michael. And Michael shows up, and I give him a hug. And meanwhile, there's all these chairs set out here. And Michael's the only one that comes. And so there's like, 40 chairs and one person, and that's Michael. And the manager's saying, well, do you want to cancel it now? And I go, no, I'll go through with it. Michael, what do you want? And Michael says, I'd like to hear your book, because he's excited for me. So I start reading, and the manager just goes, you're going to read for one person? It's very, very annoyed at this stage. And I go, yeah, I'll just read from Michael. So I start reading from the book. Michael's sitting in the front row and doing his best to be supportive and enjoy it and something. And the manager comes along, and there are these heavy iron chairs, and he starts putting the chairs away. And while I'm reading, and every chair goes together with a huge clang. It goes clang, so I'm going, Michael Forsyth was a young man in New York City. He was on his way, clang, and then I'm doing these gun bosses, and he passive aggressively took away every chair, during the whole 30 minutes of the reading, until there was only 2 chairs left. The chair that I was sitting on and Michael's chair. So that was the beginning of my book tour and my life as a professional author. And I love to say it was all up from there, but actually it was largely horizontal.
I think that I'm now just going to leave, because I don't think I have anything as humiliating as that. I think we can just stop now. I took a couple comments. First of all, I think the only thing worse than no one coming to your book event.
Oh yes,
one person.
Because
if nobody comes, you just leave. If one person comes, what do you do? And my plan is I'm hopeful that the one person who comes has not seen the author photo. And then I will sit in the audience near them. And then about 10 minutes after the event starts, I would say, he's clearly not coming. And that's, to me, is the best way to have it. But I think that U.S. book tours are particularly grueling and punishing, because there's so much travel involved, and you just don't know what's going to happen. So very quickly, and this is my other humiliating stories. I mean, last year I was on a tour, and I think I was in somewhere like Louisville, and I had to go do an event in a town, a college town outside of Kansas City, that was going to start at like 1 in the afternoon. So the limo comes to pick me up in Louisville at like 5:30, drives me to the airport, wait for the flight, take the flight, fly to Chicago, have to switch planes, spend 2 hours in the Chicago airport, then fly to Kansas City, get to Kansas City, and then wait around, and then another car comes to pick me up, to take me to this small town, which is another hour drive to get to the event. And after all of that, 2 people.
Oh.
2 people. And one of them was, I think, there for the free snacks. And I thought, never again. I can't do this anymore. I just can't.
It's the traveling, it can be really tough as well, especially in America. Yes. All the traveling is like I had an experience with a driver on a tour a year or 2 ago. It was like midway through a tour, and at the end, you get off the plane, you get through the airport, and there's a guy standing in a suit with a card and your name on it, and you shake hands, and they're very nice. They take you to a nice, usually a big black SUV type vehicle, and they drive you to the hotel. Everything's fantastic. That's real kind of rock and roll thing. So I got into one airport. It was Memphis, and we had to drive into the next state for this bookstore. It was the closest airport to the bookstore. So I got off the plane and looking around, and there's nobody there. And it's like 9 o'clock at night, and there's no one there at all. And I thought, what the hell has happened here? And I looked through my itinerary, and for every, they say, okay, it's Kerry cars or whatever cars it is. But this one, it didn't have a company name. It just said Jeff beside a phone number. So I called and said, hello, is this Jeff? And this guy answers the phone. He says, oh, hello, yeah, Jeff here. I said, Jeff, it's Steve Cavanagh here. I'm at the Memphis airport. Are you coming to get me? He says, oh, yeah. I just been pulled over by the cops. I'll be there in 15 minutes. I went, right, okay. And half an hour later, There's no Jeff. So I phoned like, Jeff, are you still coming? And Jeff said, yeah, I'll be in a green car. And then I'm looking around and said, but green, that's unusual. Usually these lovely big cars are all black and shiny. And this battered green saloon car arrives in a big cloud of black smoke. And behind the wheel is a guy, like Jeff. Now, Jeff looks like, have you seen The Big Lebowski? He looks like the dude from The Big Lebowski if the dude was forced to get a job that he didn't want. And I opened the back door of the car, and there's all this crap in the back seat, empty bottles and bits of paper and half-eaten burgers. And he sort of scrapes a space away. I put my bag in, and I get into the front seat. And in the footwell of the front seat is Jeff's filing system for his mail. There's all these letters addressed to Jeff with black footprints on them. And I says, hello, Jeff, how you doing? He says, oh, well, we'll be fine tonight. Don't worry about it. So we take off, and there's all these warning sign lights going off in the car and blinking and flashing things. And I look up, and there's a huge crack in the windscreen, like from the top to the very bottom of the car. And I said, Jeff, is this car okay? And Jeff says, oh, you don't need to worry about this car. Great car. I'm a fantastic driver. I once drove drunk, naked, from New Orleans to Oxford, Mississippi, in a truck with no brakes. You don't worry about this. And he's driving along, and I'm going, oh, I'm going to die. Jeff's going to kill me. So I didn't know I could grip a car seat with my arse until I got in there. And I got into the town, and the next day was the book event, and I spoke to the bookstore owner. Again, like 4 people came, and the bookstore owner says, so who brought you in? And I said, oh, Jeff picked me up from the airport. He said, fucking Jeff picked you up from the airport? I don't know how many Jeffs there were, but he knew instantly which Jeff. And I said, yeah. I said, oh my God, it's a wonder you're here at all. And we had a good night then after the event. We had a few beers. And then I noticed the bookstore was having a little festival in like 3 weeks' time. And I was having a look to see who was coming. And I said, that author's coming to your festival? He said, yeah. I said, for a laugh, get Jeff to pick this guy up. And I went, oh God, that's brilliant. So we got drunk. And then the next day I got scared. I phoned up the bookstore guy. I said, look, don't do it. Did we conspire to murder Martin Amis last night? And he said, yeah, I think we did. We can't get Jeff to pick up Martin Amis. And so I almost killed the literary god as well as myself. But that was scary. But I had a great time with Jeff. I never forget him. He was a painter and amateur wrestler.
You know, it's
we all
these days too. I mean, as publishers have slightly tighter budgets. You know, used to get the big black car would come and get. Now sometimes it's like, just get an Uber and we'll pay you back.
Yeah,
there is. You're either going to get some guy who shows up in a beautiful Audi or some guy in some tiny little Kia. I got picked up in one, and I couldn't believe it. It actually had roll-down windows. I didn't know anybody made a car with roll-down windows anymore. And, they got this guy driving the thing, and he said, and so where are you in town for? And so you didn't know here. So you tell him, you're not. You're going, really? He said, well, he starts telling you he plays a lot of Minecraft or some fucking video game, and he writes about it on a blog. And this guy says, you should do a book about that. And so he starts telling me about the Minecraft book that he wants to write. And I'm just like,
oh, brilliant.
Well, my niece writes poetry. Can she call you?
Can I tell I lived in Australia for 11 years, and I ended up doing the Melbourne Writers Festival a lot. And
in Footscray, were you?
Sorry, I never went to Footscray. People know better than to go to Footscray. That's where they only take the really jet lag people. But I did the Perth Writers Festival once, and I had a very similar experience with SJ, with the hostile interviewer. And I don't think you know this story.
No.
And I flew to Perth, and it's still a healthy flight from Melbourne. And I get in, and I was doing this event with Irvine Welsh, and it was me and Irvine Welsh and this young woman who is the interviewer. And so we're in the green room beforehand, and she says to Irvine, oh my God, I'm a hugest fan of your books. I just love train spotting. I follow you on Twitter and Instagram. You're one of my heroes. And she says to me, I'm sitting right there. She said, Adrian, I haven't had the chance to read your books yet. Says, okay, let's get started. And so this event, this was a 90-minute event, and so she would ask Irvine, and she said, so in train spotting, when you had the baby, and the baby was on heroin, what were the socioeconomic complexities of that? And he would give a answer, but then there'd be 4 more questions to Irvine, and then she'd remember that I was on the other side, and she'd go, so Adrian, what was your book about?
Yeah.
And I just go, it's a crime novel set in Northern Ireland. Says, oh, that's near Scotland, isn't it? Northern Ireland. That brings me back to Irvine. So this horrible nightmare went on for 90 minutes. And then afterwards, as you say, you have to go to the signing table. And so after it was all over, I went to the publicist and I said, look, I think I'm just going to skip the signing table, and I'm just going to go back to the hotel bar and have a beer, because at least to me that didn't go particularly well. I thought, she said, oh no, you can't do that. You're contractually obliged to be at the signing table for 30 minutes at the Perth Writers Festival. And so then I had to sit next to Irvine for the next 30 minutes while he has a queue in front of him of 200 people coming down to get their books signed, telling him how he's changed their life for the better and how he's their idol and God. And meanwhile, I'm sitting there in the hot sun and not a single person has come to get their books. And I have to sit there as a contractual obligation. So that wasn't so bad. I was just going, oh, Adrian, this will build your character. This is the sort of thing, it'll toughen you up, this sort of thing. And it wasn't so bad, really, just sitting there in the bleak, nihilistic wastes of a Perth car park. But then occasionally, Irvine, when I was standing in the books and talking to the fans, occasionally he'd look over to me like this.
That's worse. That's worse. You shouldn't do that.
I'm sorry, mate. I can't help. I can't help being a fucking genius.
I can't help being a fucking genius. That's right. I can't help being a fucking genius.
And there was those looks of pity. That's what killed me. That's what I wanted to. I thought I was and for the last 20 minutes of it, I was thinking, murder suicide. I kill him and then jump off the car park.
We've all done those events where we get paired with somebody who's way bigger than we are. I mean, like 13, 14 years ago, before I'd had any bestsellers and so forth, they end up, Ian Rankin's on tour in Canada, and they pair me with Ian. And 300 people come out, and I go up first to talk about my book, and I said, I just hope some of you are here for Ian. And then we come to the signing, of course, afterwards, and it's the same deal. I'm busy straightening the books on the table, making them tidy, and that they're lined up nice towards the edge. I've got nobody, and Ian's got them lined up into the next time zone. Oh. And I think I sold one book, and that was to Ian. It was brutal, but but we've all had those. You get paired with somebody who's immense.
Yeah. I wonder, is Ian watching? He's probably laughing about that, thinking, yeah, that was a good day. Steve, give us another one of yours.
Well, I was just thinking about French events have always been, I really love doing French book festivals, especially crime festivals, but they're always really interesting because, quite rightly, they're always held in French, so which I don't speak. I've got an O level in French, but that's it. So some of my most humiliating things have been in France. One of which, in particular, they had this one festival. I was doing a panel event, so me and 3 others, and I think a moderator as well. But I had to wear an earpiece, and someone was sat at the back translating what was being said, obviously, and I could hear in my earpiece. But I knocked it just as the event started, and it went out of tune. So I was tuned into next door. And I didn't realise for the first 5 minutes, I was sort of like watching people's lips move and then thinking, but this is not matching up with what I'm hearing. And why is everyone laughing? And then I realised so I was spending the whole event sort of trying to tune it in to the right event and failed. And so spent the whole hour, I think it was, not having a clue what was going on. then I had to leave. I had to do. I don't know if you've done signings at book festivals in France, but they're very different. Certainly different to the UK and most other places, in that you sit there for 3 hours behind.
Yes,
Oh my God.
awful.
It's not that you sit there after your event until the queue has gone. You sit there for 3 hours until your allotted time is up and it gets advertised. SJ Watson is there for 3 hours, so you just have to sit there behind a pile of your books, and people come up and they wander up and they sort of look down at your book and they look up at you. They look down at your book again. They might pick it up if you're really lucky and read the back, and look at you, and then they put it down and walk off. And you're like, was it something I did, or so that was quite humiliating. So yeah, that was difficult. But I think my favourite story was, one of my favourite things is, because I do perversely kind of like it, is when you get asked really difficult or weird or awkward questions. And I was in Birmingham once, which is very near where I'm from. So it felt a bit like a homecoming for me. And also it was an event called Big City Reads. So the whole point was that they'd sort of given Before I Go to Sleep out to lots of people in Birmingham. So it was a very different style of event, because normally, especially for thriller and crime writers, obviously when you're doing events, you're talking to people who haven't read the book yet, so you can't really talk about spoilers or some of the ideas behind the book. But this was an event to people who had read the book. That was the whole point. It was supposed to be like a big book group, and it was in Birmingham Library, so it was quite big, and it was full, and it was like a big thing for me. And so I did the event, and it went really well, and I was really pleased. And then it was any questions. And the first question, this woman's hand shot up, almost like she'd been dying to ask this for months. And finally, she had her moment. And she said, I just wondered, in Before I Go to Sleep, why does Christine wear such awful clothes? And I was like, that's your question? So I tried to be really sort of clever, because I had a good answer. In fact, anyone who hasn't read the book, it's about a woman who has no memory and who relies on her husband. So I was like, well, if you think about who's choosing her clothes for her, she's sort of incapacitated. So if you think about it, it makes sense. And she went, yeah, but she lost her memory, not her taste. I felt really put in my place there.
I've never done a festival in France, but I did the Semana Negra once in Spain.
Yeah, I've done Semana Negra.
And my very, very first event, that was for one of the Sean Duffy novels, which, if you don't know, they're set in Belfast during the Troubles. And I try to take a middle perspective between all the competing factions. So I'm sort of tough on the Brits, and I'm sort of tough on the IRA, and tough on the Protestant paramilitaries and stuff, try and be fair. And but when I got down to the Semana Negra, my again, it was the earpiece translation thing. And my very first event, it was just me and this moderator for an hour. And my very first, he was a left-wing activist from northern Spain, so he's a big fan of ETA. And his very first question to me, which I got translated, was, I've read your book, and my first question is this: why have you betrayed the revolution? And it went on like that for the next 55 minutes, where I was this traitor to the cause of international socialism and revolution, and I personally had murdered Che Guevara in the jungles of Bolivia. And I thought at the end he was going to organize a murder. He says, okay, we've heard what he had to say. It felt a lot more like a show trial than an actual event. We've given him a fair hearing. Let's just take him out the back and shoot him. So,
God.
Steve, the Watson Steve, you said two things that reminded me of a couple others. Just quickly, I've had the worst kind of event you can do is where they just plunk you at the front of a bookstore in a mall, and people walk by and think, "Who's that poor bastard?"
oh, that's grim.
But like the French thing, that just happened to me in Canada. So this is years ago. I'm sitting at a desk at the front of a mall, and people walk by. No one is interested. No one's interested in the book. No one stopped. Finally, it's almost, my hour is almost over. And this older guy, wearing, of all things, a little French beret, walks past the table. He sees the books. He looks at me. He sees the books, and he's clearly intrigued. And he walks over to the table, and he leans down, and he says to me, do they sell flags here? I said, I don't think so. He said, okay. And off he went. That was it. That was my hour. But the other one, you talked about coffee, and this is one of my favorite stories. So in Canada, our big bookstore chain is Chapters. Like, so they have these massive box stores like a Barnes and Noble or a Waterstones. And this guy's asked me to come down and do an event at a Chapters in the afternoon on a long holiday weekend in Canada when people are either home gardening or opening up their cottage or something. So I come to this Chapters. I drive over an hour to get to this store. And I come in at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and it's not that there's nobody for my event. There's no one in the store anywhere. Like, there's no one looking at magazines. There's nobody in the Starbucks. There's nobody anywhere in this store. It's kind of like some sort of, like, going to use it for a post-apocalyptic movie or something. And so the manager shows me to the table. We take up to the table, and there's the books. They're all prepared. And we're about 5-10 minutes before the event, and he says to me, I swear to God, he says to me, do you want to just sign books, or do you want to do a reading? I think that I will just sign. He said, okay. But now he says there's a kid working in the Starbucks over there. He's got nothing to do. And he gives the high sign to the kid in the Starbucks. We got a big important author here. So he says to me, go on over there, have a coffee on us, and then we'll get started. Great. So I go over to the Starbucks area, and I see the kid there, and I said, listen, can I get, I'll have a latte. And I'm looking behind the little glass screen cover there, and I've driven a long way. I was kind of hungry. I said, can I get one of these chocolate chip cookies? And the kid looks panicked. He says to me, I know I can give you the coffee for free. I'm not sure about the cookie. I said, I'll pay for the cookie. He was like, okay. Now, I've always felt that if I ever did a book about humiliating author experiences, I would call it, I'm not sure about the cookie.
Yes.
Well, I have a humiliating. This is not my pièce de résistance, but I have a humiliating bookstore author experience. I worked at the 82nd and Broadway Barnes and Noble for several years, and I used to do author events. I was in charge of getting the author in and doing an event. So a famous, I don't want to say this person's name.
You have to say the name.
I'm not going to say the name.
There's no one else here. You may as well.
Yeah.
No. I'll put it like this, and I won't confirm or deny if you suggest the name. Let's just say a famous guru, New Age thinker, came in to do a packed event. I mean, it was a completely packed event. And my job was to get him to the little green room area and to give him the microphone and to go up on the little lectern. And so, this is a person who teaches a philosophy of peace and love and understanding and patience and living in the moment and joy. And we can all grow together. And all you have to do is treat your fellow man as you would wish to be treated, and the world will be a better place. So we get onto the stage, and he comes up on to his little presentation, and the microphone's not working. And he turns to, I'm sitting on the dais or nearby, maybe I'm standing, and as the event is going on, he starts going in, and he says, some bloody fool has given me a bad microphone, and I apologize. I'm always prepared for my events, but the problem here is this store and this person. And so everyone now, 200 people turned to look at me, and I asked, and he said, now there are people out who don't believe in this philosophy, who are out to sabotage it. I'm not saying that this is somebody who is out to do that, but there are those people. So other people are now thinking he's not just an incompetent,
he's a saboteur.
He's actually a saboteur who's out to destroy this guru. And so the microphone would click on and off for the next hour, and every time it would go off, he would just turn, this famous guru would just turn around and give me the dirtiest look. And then all the people in the front row were just sitting there furious, looking at me. And then after, we got through, and got all the chat from all the people in the queue. He says, you know, you should have prepared better. Didn't you know he's a really famous author?
Oh my
you know,
God.
you know, just 60 people coming up and just going, you know, I'll never be back in this store. The way you treated this guy is absolutely appalling. So
That's brilliant.
So that's
you had author humiliation before you were an author.
Before I was even an author. I think
that's just something very special about that.
Yes.
Steve, give us another one here, man. I'm loving this.
Well, it's funny. On the same tour, the Footscray tour, it culminated in Sydney, and I was really looking forward to Sydney because 90 people had apparently bought tickets.
Ooh, that's a good number.
Yeah. Anyway, so I arrived, and it was raining. And I was, my publicist is so lovely, but she told me afterwards it was because it was raining, but I'm not sure if it really was because it was raining. Because about 5 minutes before the event was due to start, 7 people had turned up.
Oh,
and then 5 minutes after the event was due to start, it was still just the 7 people. So we talked to the librarian. The librarian said, well, and I said, look, these 7 people have made the effort, you know, and it's, so I'm not going to I'm not going to throw a hissy fit and storm off. Of course, I'm going to get up and do a reading and have a bit of a chat. So anyway, so I stood there at this lectern and started to talk, and I looked out, and there was a woman at the back who was on her laptop the whole time, just typing. And I don't think, she never looked up once, so I don't think she was typing I don't know what she was doing, but I don't think it was anything to do with anything I was talking about. And there was a woman at the front who didn't even didn't look at me. She was right in front of me and didn't look up even once. And I remember, like, nobody was interested at all. And I spent the whole event, I was talking, because I wasn't being interviewed, which I always find quite difficult, because you have to kind of the whole thing, don't you? So I sort of read for about 5 minutes, and I talked about some of the ideas behind the book, and all the time nobody was showing any interest whatsoever. So after about half an hour or something, I read for another 10 minutes because I may just a bit of reading now. So but all the time there was this dialogue in my head was going, I'm never doing this again. I am never doing this again. I am never doing another event for as long as I live. And this isn't like me, and thank goodness I didn't do it, but I was really, really close to just saying to the woman at the front, you haven't even looked at me. And thank goodness I didn't, because the event finished, I closed the book, I said, well, thank you for listening, even though none of you had. I didn't say that, but thank you for listening. And then she stood up, and she was blind. She'd got a white stick. And actually, she was the one that came up to me and spoke to me afterwards.
Oh.
I really enjoyed it. So, that was a bullet dodged.
That really was.
Never to be a diva.
Well, you got away with it, man. How would you know? Sometimes you can't tell anything.
No.
Imagine
you really did dodge a bullet there.
Yeah.
Mr. Barclay, have you caught any bullets? Any ones
Well,
you failed to dodge?
I was just thinking I have a slightly different kind of embarrassment story that's a little different than the others. And for the purpose of the story, you must remember that I was wearing light tan khakis. That's critical. And so I'm about to go on stage and do a reading up at the microphone at this event in Ontario here. And you know what it's like? You're just about to go on, you think, do I need to go to the bathroom? Maybe maybe it would be prudent to go to the bathroom. So I think, yes, I'm going to just run down, have a quick whiz. I'm going to run down. That went just fine. And then after that, I go to the sink to wash my hands. And for whatever reason, the plumbing in this particular building has the pressure force of a fire hose. So when I turn on the tap in the sink, the water comes into the sink, goes out of the sink, over to the counter, and completely soaks me in this particular area in my light tan khakis. And so now, and then they're saying, time to go on, and now I go on stage like that. And sadly, this was a writer's event where people came. So that was rather unfortunate. And all I could do is I just came out and I just went with it. I came out and I said, let me explain. And so I did. But, so there are different kinds of humiliation. Sometimes you can even family can sort of prick your burst your bubble. I was doing an event one time, one of these writer advice kind of things. And so you go to the front, you're giving writerly advice, and there's always really great questions like, how big should the margins be when you're writing?
Oh yeah,
Stuff like
that's
that.
good.
But there were people there, and my wife had come in. When I finished this event, I came back and saw her, and she said, she was rather incredulous. She said, people were writing down what you were saying. No one at home's ever paid attention. I guess it was just really a revelation for her.
Well, just as you're saying about nipping to the bathroom before an event, very quickly, I don't know, I guess somehow fell into getting this amazing gig. And it was in like a private millionaire's resort in Georgia called Sea Island. I've never mentioned the name before, and I'm mentioning it now. But there was me and a few other writers, and I got to bring a +1. So Tracy came with me. Tracy, this got me so many brownie points with my wife for so many years. I can't begin to tell you. So it was all expenses paid. First class from Ireland flew us over. And it was kind of like a Butlins for millionaires. You know, it was an incredible place. When we arrived, we checked in, and they said, okay, in your room, and I was there. And the lady said to me, and if you'd like your complimentary Mercedes, you go and speak to that man over there. So you get your own Mercedes to drive around the island in. Like, it was a fucking amazing place. And they said to Tracy, you can have, you know, like a treatment or a thing. So Tracy is kayaking and horseback riding and getting cryotherapy treatments and in the spa. And I have to do one event for this and like talk to some people. So we were there for like 4 days. And we've had 3 days of luxury meals, all expenses paid. And I have to go and do my event now. It's 5 minutes. So I said, well, I'm going to go to the bathroom. So I go into the toilet, and just as I got in, I heard someone, I thought it was maybe a cleaner coming in. So I went into the stall, and everything happened as it's supposed to happen. And then I said, right, I'm ready to go. And so I pulled the handle down of the stall, the toilet stall, to get out, and nothing happened. I pulled it down again, and it harder this time, and I heard the entire mechanism just breaking in my hand. And the way this place was, the way it was built, it was like floor to ceiling, this toilet, and there's no air conditioning in it. It's like 110 degrees. It's really hot. There's no window. There's like a window thing with wooden slats in the middle of it. And Tracy has my phone, and I'm locked in the world's hottest, most secure toilet. And now it's 2:00, and there's a ballroom full of people for me to go to. So I can't do anything. I started shouting for help, and then I got scared. I thought I could die in here. It was that hot. And then the bar manager came in, and he said, "You all right in there?" I said, "No, I'm the author. I'm doing the event. I'm stuck in here." And I could hear him rattling the handle, and he rattled the handle, and he said, "You're really stuck in there." I said, "Tell me about it." So he phoned the restaurant. The restaurant manager comes in, the event manager comes in, and the bar manager and the hotel manager comes in. And they all have a go at the door, and the door's not moving. And there's no way, it's floor to ceiling. I can't climb out or get under anything. So the events manager goes into the ballroom full of people and says, the author will be delayed because he's locked in the toilet and we can't get him out. Now, that's not to say that the author has misfortunately, because it's like I barricaded myself in his toilet and I'm not coming out to speak to anyone. I'm too scared. So what happens is I'm dying in this. The call for engineers, and the barman goes, and again, the type of place it was, he went and he got a huge big glass of Pinot Grigio and a big long straw, which he fed through the slats of the door. And I think, I've had like a bottle of Pinot Grigio in me. But 20 minutes later, they bust me out of this toilet, and I walk into the ballroom. And as I walk in, I think people have thought that I had stage fright, and I've locked myself in the toilet. There was a huge round of applause as I came in. Never had it before, never had it since. But it was awful, awful. But it was good fun, good fun. Give us another story. Adrian, can you tell us the time, didn't you have to do a reading once where you had to kind of make things up on the go?
Oh, yeah, that story?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, I'll tell that story. So I'm not going to name the bookstore because it's a lovely bookstore. It's not really their fault. and I'm happy for people to shit on the Boulder bookstore, but this one was a communication problem, so I'm not going to name this. This is also in the South, and again, it was my first book, Dead I Well May Be, and my very first book tour. I think it was like my second event ever in my bookstore, and it was a good one because it was a big bookstore and they had a packed house, and they told me that I was going to be part of a bigger show. There was going to be music, and there was going to be a poetry reading, and then the centerpiece was going to be me doing a 15-minute book reading, and then there was going to be a little bit more music, and that was going to be the end. So I was excited because there was easily 300 people in there. So I was, quite thrilled about it. And we go out, and I'm reading from this book called Dead I Well May Be, and it's a sort of authentic look at Irish gangsters living in New York in the early 90s. So the word fuck gets used maybe 20 or 30 times in every page because I wanted it to be really, really authentic. So there's lots of fucks, there's lots of motherfuckers, there's lots of shits, just the whole thing. There's a lot of expletives on the page. So I'm reading there, and I've got this really funny passage that I'm going to read, like it's about 4 pages long. And I've read it before, I've rehearsed it, and I'm quite confident about this event. So I'm about to go on, and I'm listening to the music, and I'm looking backstage at the crowd, big crowd. I'm thinking, this is Adrian. This is your moment of redemption, mate. After that fiasco in Boulder, this is where you flower into a great phoenix, and they will remember your name as this great young Irish, this herald of the new Irish literature. And before they go out, the event manager comes to me and says, "Oh, there's just one thing I forgot to tell you, or maybe you weren't informed about this. We're going out live on the local NPR station, so there can be no swearing of any kind." And I said, "My whole book is swearing." He says, "Well, you're just going to have to avoid the swearing." He says, "Okay, good luck." And then she pushes me on stage. So this book that I have, this passage where I know really well, and it's actually quite funny. I come up onto the stage and I just go, Michael Forsyth walked into the room and said, "Okay, you chaps, why are you so late? This is jolly bad behavior, fellows. Who are you? Do you think you're talking to, you scoundrel?" And I'm just stuttering and making it all up as I'm going along. And it's like the flop sweat in broadcast news. I am pouring with sweat, and I'm just trying to get through this thing where I'm just literally making up this whole thing as I'm going along. And the audience, which had been with me, is now sort of fidgeting and looking. I think they have some kind of idiot up on stage because I'm stuttering and confused. And I get through this whole reading, and I look over at the event manager, and she holds up 2 fingers, 2 minutes to go. And I go, "Oh, thank God." And so I read it, and I look over at her, and then she's going 3. And I've only actually been reading for 2 minutes. And now I had reading for 3 minutes. And I actually had 12 minutes to go of this fiasco performance. And I'm just going, "Oh God, please." So this is the moment where you go, I've got to fake a heart attack or just faint or something. And I've got to get off this stage. But so I manfully struggle on to the end of this passage. And she does 15 minutes. And then Michael Forsyth said, "Okay, chappies, thank you so much for your cooperation today. Goodbye." And I finish this horrific book reading. And there's literally 200 people. And there's 9 sympathetic people applauding. They're just going, "It's so nice they're giving the mentally challenged or a chance here to perform, because clearly this boy has a lot of problems and issues." And then I walk, and I've lost about 2 pounds, just in sweat. And I just get off the stage shaking. And the event manager just went, "I thought that went very well." So that was definitely top 5 worst.
All right, Steve and Linwood, come on. Give us another couple of your stories. We'll still get some time left.
I was wondering if anyone else had any walkouts. I had a walkout once, which was completely unexpected.
Wow.
So yeah, I was in the Borders doing a festival up there, and that wasn't a festival; it was a bookstore. Really well attended, because I think not that many people go up there. So actually, when people do go there, everyone in the village turns out. But I was about halfway through. It was during the Q&A. So I'd done a reading of about 2 minutes. So it wasn't about swearing or anything like that. I'd read for about 2 minutes and I was being interviewed. And then this woman towards the back just stood up really noisily and went, "I'm not listening to this." And walked out. And afterwards, I was like, what had I said? And she said, "Oh," and then the bookstore, they were like, "Oh, she's always like that. She does it every time." But apparently it was because I'd been asked a question about why I write from a woman's point of view. And I'd said, well, because I'm interested in women, the things that happen before women and the particular problems that women face. And I consider myself to be at least pro-feminist, if not feminist, and da-da-da-da-da. And then that was the point at which she decided that she wasn't listening to any more of my I don't know what she thought, left-wing garbage, maybe she thought it was, I'm not sure. But yeah, so I had a walkout. So,
that's brilliant. I've never had a walkout, I have to say. Then have you had a walkout?
One time I was doing a reading and I saw, it was a pretty good crowd, and I saw, I think, 3 or 4 women get up and walk out together. And I couldn't quite tell who they were. I found out later that it was my wife, my publisher, my publicist. They all decided to go get a drink.
Steve, I thought you did that event for me where the guy, I thought I was doing it with you where the guy heckled us for being ponces and walked out. I thought I did that with you.
No, that was,
I can't remember.
Or was that somebody else?
Many times.
Basically, a guy stood up and said that we were using Ponzi language. There were a bunch of ponces, and he walked out. Was that with you? I thought that was with you, Steve. No,
it wasn't with me. No,
was it another Irish writer? That was in the charming and always accommodating, friendly city of Boston, and a guy just yelled at us. It's very similar to SJ's. Just went, "Nah, you're a bunch of ponces." All this fancy literature talk. What kind of event did you think this was going to be? Did you think this was going to be a raucous wrestling match? But no, he was disgusted with our shtick. And I
did have a lady in the audience who I did want to leave, though. I wanted her to leave. I did an event in a bookstore in Seattle. It was a great one on the tour because there was another author there, and we were chatting. It was Chandler Baker, who's the author of the Whisper Network, and it's a really good book. So we were chatting away, and there wasn't too many there. There was maybe about 10 or 12 people there, and there was a woman who sat right in the front, and she had red hair, and she sat quietly for the first sort of 10 minutes, and then I noticed whenever Chandler asked me a question, this lady would just go, "Oh, God," like this. Look at her watch. And she did it the first time, and I thought, what happened there? But every time and Ellie would give the answer, and I noticed the lady had a book in her lap, but I could only see the pages. I couldn't see the spine or anything. And every time Chandler asked me a question, "Oh, God," and roll her eyes and look at her then. Tap her watch and stuff. And I thought, what the hell's going on here? It's this woman. I thought, as the event went on, I thought, well, she's obviously a fan of Chandler's and she has to be somewhere and she wants the event to end so she can get her book signed. And Chandler noticed it as well. And we cut it short. We only did like about 20 minutes. And then Chandler says, "Well, thanks very much for Steve Cavanagh coming." And I thanked Chandler Baker and says, "Well, thanks very much for coming, folks. That's the end and we'll sign your books." And the lady just got up and fucked off. I never spoke to anybody else. I said, "Why didn't you leave? Why didn't you just leave before that?"
Awful. I think the weirdest complaint I ever had at a book event was a woman who said that she didn't like it when characters in my book were described as clearing their throat, because she had a sort of throat thing and she didn't like to read. And she said, "Do you know that in Mark Billingham's last book, he had people clearing their throat 34 times. And I thought, well, I certainly won't do that again. And I advised Mark about it as well, that he needs to just smarten up.
I've always liked it when they complain about your mistakes.
Yeah.
In front of like a lot of other people, they just put it that. On page 34 of your book, you have someone driving down the M4 and they take the junction and just go, but the M4 wasn't completed until 1957. And they just go, blah, blah, blah. So that's always fantastic. You know, when they point out all your many errors.
I mean, has anybody? I have never had a book that didn't have at least a typo in it somewhere.
Oh, sure.
And then you get the little people sitting around going, "Do you have no editors? No proofreaders at all?"
Or 1 star. This took me out of the book. This, he ended the paragraph without a full stop. How dare you? Is this the modern way? 1 star.
It's 5:00 and our time is officially up, but I'm not. Time for one quick. Who wants to give us one quick story?
Well, I've got one that sort of relates to that. I was at an event in Cambridge for the film Before I Go to Sleep, so that was good. And it was luckily because I was on the panel with the director Rowan, and we watched they'd all watched the film, and then we'd appeared to answer some questions, and somebody asked a question about the plot, and I was about to publish my second book. So I hadn't really thought about Before I Go to Sleep for, 2 years in any serious way. And they asked this question about the plot. And in my mind, and it was a plot hole they felt. I can't remember the detail of it, but they thought they'd seen this plot hole that you could drive a juggernaut through, and asked me to explain it. And my mind went completely blank. And for a second, I thought, I think you're right, actually. and I remember thinking, the whole book doesn't work because you're right. And then luckily, Rowan, who just directed, he probably spent at least as much time thinking about this book as I had by the time the film had come out, had the perfect answer. So I could just sit back and he rescued me. But that was the closest I've ever come to a complete meltdown. It was a really good answer as well, actually. So I think in future, I'm going to suggest that Rowan does all my events.
Yeah.
That's probably the best way.
That's the best way.
Yeah.
This has been great. People don't want this to end. Go on. Has anyone got one other quick one?
I'll just say to SJ's point. Steve knows this. I never read from the actual book when I do a book event. I always read from the galley, because whenever I read from the actual book, I always find something that I actually hate. I just think, oh my God, why did I leave that in? I'm such an idiot, or something that could be compressed. Whereas if you read from the galley, you can think to yourself, oh, I'm sure someone caught this.
Yeah.
I'm sure an editor or a copy editor caught this. That was never published. No, and my shame is not revealed to the world, because I'm sure before this went into print, someone caught this really stupid thing that I said. So that's another thing. I never ever read from the actual book itself. I always read from the galley, because I'm too ashamed.
Oh, that's tricky. Anyone got then we've got a quick final one?
Last one I'll give you is just like I say, when you first have a big book out, you think, what a big deal I am. And I had No Time for Goodbye. It came out in hardcover in Canada. Went into a bookstore in my own town, and there it was at the front of the store, 10 copies. And this young woman behind the counter who was, and I said, I wrote this, would you like me to sign copies? And she said, sure, sign one. He's not signing, so I pulled them all down, and I signed one, and then I went to sign the next one, and she said, just one. Welcome to fame.
Yeah. Brilliant. Well, listen, folks, I could do this all night. Next time we do this, we'll do it in a bar, and we'll have a drink, and this will go on all night. So listen, it just falls for me to say thank you so much to S.J. Watson, Linwood, Barclay, Adrian, McKinty. Go and buy their books right now, folks. This has been really entertaining. I hope you've enjoyed it as much as I have.
It's been great fun.
Our next panel is 6:30, The Zoom of Blues, with Val McDermott, Miranda Dickinson, and Stuart Neville and Doug Johnson. God knows what they're going to do. We'll do something. So come back for that. Thanks, folks.
Thanks, guys.
Bye.
Bye.